Five. Yes.
All right.
We are webcamming and we are not naked.
Well, Mike's
That's what I want you to think.
Yeah. Welcome to the second episode of Lone Star Legacy. This is an emergency session that we pulled together after today's banned and restricted announcement. It's Monday, April 24th, and as of about 10 o'clock Central Time this morning, Sensei's Divining Top is banned in Legacy. So we had wanted to talk about that. If you're listening to this podcast, you're probably familiar with Legacy already. And as part of that, you've probably heard a number of arguments about whether or not a ban was needed or what was the correct ban. So as such, I think we're not going to delve too far into that. But we do have a handful of questions and topics about the ban that we wanted to go over. So on the call today, I have a number of members of the Goyfs with me. I have Stephen Bacala.
Hey, thanks for having me. Bacala.
Yeah, Bacala. Definitely. Elijah Henley.
Morning.
Sam Craven, who you heard on the last cast.
Why, hello there.
And Mike O'Malley, who was also on the last episode.
Hey guys, how's it going?
So we're going to talk about the Sensei's Divining Top ban. After we wrap that up, I think we're going to transition into discussing the vintage restrictions, at which point a number of us might hop off the call because we're not as informed about vintage.
Make uninformed claims. This is America, man.
All right. Gus did nothing wrong.
What was that?
Gus did nothing wrong.
Well, we'll leave that to Ben and Sam. So I think as a starting point, and again, any listeners who are familiar with Legacy probably already know this, but the biggest effect that the Sensei's Divining Top ban is going to have is that Miracles is going to be severely affected as a deck. It runs off of the countertop combo and also relies on the Miracles mechanic, which is heavily powered by Sensei's Divining Top. So I think the first question we wanted to cover tonight is whether or not Miracles is dead as a result of this ban.
Definitely.
Yeah. Yes. Next question.
I mean, I don't think the deck can really function without it, like, at all. Like, counterbalance is basically unplayable without a way to instant speed at any time when you have mana available. Manipulate the top three cards of your deck. And then the Miracles cards are also very bad if you can't control exactly when you draw them at all times.
Yeah, I think that, in both Modern and Legacy, Modern's a good example of a format where you have the Miracles cards and you have Counterbalance but no top, and there's just no Miracles deck or, Counterbalance deck. And also just if the Miracles, while powerful, don't really have a home anywhere in Legacy without the top, other than you'll occasionally see Thunderous Wrath played as a fun of in some Brainstorm decks, and that's really more cute than accepted at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I think I could see potentially Terminus being a spicy one of them, like a blue-white control deck at some point, just for the surprise one mana board wipe. But I think that card's not going to happen as often.
But yeah, it's also at 6 mana. It's not that much worse than a Wrath of God, I guess. Like in a deck that's going to be playing a million lands and so forth.
Right, but in a format where Supreme Verdict is legal, I think it's hard to really get past the fun of Terminus.
Yeah, it's something we were talking about before we started the call is who here has played Miracles, and I have not played it, but for a little while I was playing a tier 4 deck called Quinn the Eskimo, which is a mono white control deck, and that runs top. And I remember playing Terminus in that where there was no way of really getting it out of your hand unless you were on a build playing Scroll Rack. And the card was fine if you were able to control the board with things like Swords to Plowshares. Having a 6 mana Wrath isn't totally bad, but it was absolutely worse than just Supreme Verdict or Wrath of God. But on that note, how... we're asking whether or not Miracles is dead. How important are all of these individual components to the deck, or is it really just that everything kind of came together based on synergies between the different cards?
deck was basically abusing the two best synergies with top. I mean, when you don't have it, Counterbalance doesn't counter anything reliably, and Terminus is just as often a 6-mana card in your hand as it is in your deck.
Yeah, and I mean, without the Counterbalance top combo, Miracles loses pretty much all of its free wins. And I think just one of the big components of being a tier 1 deck is you just, if you sleeve it up for a 15-round SCG, if you play all 15 rounds, you're going to get some number of games on the house. And I just don't think that's possible to happen with Miracles without the top Counterbalance combo.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I agree. And likewise, it's easiest to point that out with how top interacts with Counterbalance. But if you also think about the free wins you get off of having, 1-mana instant speed Wraths, or being up to top and have an end of turn, make 5 Angels off an Entreat, or even just have 2 tops out and flip them a bunch of times to make a bunch of Mentor tokens. It seems like a lot of all the free wins that are possible in the deck are all just powered by top. So, but yeah, it seems like we all basically agree it's going to be dead with this ban.
Yeah, I actually asked, what is his name? One of the French guys back when I was on Everyday Eternal, and we talked about like certain cards. If this was banned, what do you play if this was banned? Yada yada yada. And he was like, if top is restricted, the card is unplayable, or the deck is unplayable.
Yeah, and I think that probably feeds into our next question, which is, what do Miracles players do now? Do they salvage their deck into something that's sort of a next evolution of Miracles, or maybe devolution of Miracles, or is there something that it ports over into other than that?
Well, assuming budget and money is not a concern, I imagine the more spike-oriented ones are probably going to shift over to Delver, because the upside of Miracles is very adaptable, and Delver is a very adaptable archetype. So it gives you a lot of game over 15 rounds. And the dedicated control guys are just going to play whatever control pile's best.
I think on the flip side of that, if money is a concern, I just don't think that a scroll rack version of Miracles is viable. I think what's more likely to see is someone who owns Tundras might end up playing a blue-white Stoneblade or even a Jeskai. Or if you were playing the red splash in Miracles, you can use your Volcanics to build just blue-red Delver. I think we may see a little bit of an uptick in that. Because once you've got the duels and the fetches, there really aren't many, and the forces, there's not exactly a lot of expensive parts to that deck.
No.
Yeah,
Blue-red Delver is a little, I imagine, becomes a little better after with the Terminus ban, or top ban, sorry.
Yeah, I think that's probably the Delver version that improves the most, along with Rug, just because without Abrupt Decay, they didn't have much of a fighting chance against Miracles.
I think it's interesting. We're talking about porting over, and y'all are all talking about essentially just completely changing decks. And I would guess that a lot of people are not. I mean, maybe this is the money is an object thing, but I would guess a lot of people are probably going to go to another blue-white control build just because that's what they've got the big stuff for. They've got the forces, the fetches, and the duels for a blue-white control build.
Yeah, I think we're definitely going to see, whether or not it's good, we'll see more like Stoneblade style decks. We might see people trying to do, I don't know, like blue-white, like Thopter Sword. Like, I don't know.
What do you think about a blue-white control deck with Mentor, kind of a la what we see a lot of in Vintage?
There was actually a Esper Mentor deck I saw a few months ago that's playing like ball therapies and stuff like that. That might actually be like a decent deck to transition to. Now you have Fatal Push, but you dig it up somewhere on the source. Somebody's top 8 in a CGIQ, but it seemed interesting, but no one's really done anything with it since then. So that might be something some players look into.
Yeah, I could see kind of some sort of Esper tokens, whether that be Thopter Sword or like a Mentor deck with Cabal therapies and Lingering Souls and just a bunch of cheap spells to get a ton of stuff out there.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the difficult question when you're talking about porting over into a blue-white control deck is that until now there's been no real incentive, competitively speaking, to play a blue-white control deck that isn't Miracles. So a lot of people who are asking this question aren't really sure what a blue-white non-Miracles control deck even means.
Well, and I would suspect that a pure blue-white control deck no longer exists, because like the build of Stoneforge Mystic that seems to be the most controlling to me is Esper Deathblade, which is like 3.1 colors. So basically 4 colors, and you can play a solid 4 colors. And that's a deck that I know me and a couple other people have built, and basically said, this is a deck that if you win, it's all on you, and if you lose, it's probably also all on you, which is a thing that makes the deck really fun to play. But it's not going to be as oops easy win as going turn 1 counterbalance, turn 2, or turn 1 top, turn 2 counterbalance, try and resolve something.
Yeah, and I mean, it includes Deathrite Shaman, which is probably now going to be the card that gets the most salt as, this card is stupid, this card should be banned. And, I mean, I think the spiky players are going to want to move into a deck that plays Deathrite Shaman, because it's just, I don't know.
Well, I think
it's just the best. It's the best.
Yeah, it's absolutely great. It's warped the format to the point where the vast majority of decks are either playing Deathrite Shaman or simply don't care about Deathrite Shaman and are trying to go over the top of it. I think with the exception of Death and Taxes, all of the Tier 1 fair decks are Deathrite Shaman decks right now.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I agree. We mentioned this idea that the really competitive guys are probably just going to hop over and do a deck like that. A question is, does your average Miracles player, do you think, have a really large collection where they're able to do that? Or are they people who maybe bought into Legacy and chose the #1 deck and decided that's what they're going to play, and that's all they own? And there's obviously no real way of knowing that, but my feeling is there's probably lots of people who are in that boat where they don't really have, a bunch of undergrounds and Trops sitting around so they can easily hop into Bug.
Well, it'll just be a process, because Legacy moves slowly in a lot of different ways, and one of those ways is definitely that most of the time when people change decks, it takes them time to acquire the cards because of the price of admission to the format is so high. Yeah, but they'll change. They're gonna have to do something, like either that or they're just gonna quit Legacy, which may actually cause prices to come down a little bit. Like if lots of people are like, so salty, like how could Wizards do this? This is the worst ban ever. I'm quitting the format. Like you could see a increase in supply of of cards that people are just offloading because they don't want to play Legacy anymore. I don't know.
There'll definitely be a non-0% increase in the people playing blue-white land still calling it.
I guess that's probably the absolute minimum number of cards required to change is probably blue-white land still. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that or Stoneblade, right? I mean, I'm not familiar enough with Stoneblade or Landstill lists, but well,
and I gotta imagine a Stoneforge and a Batterskull together costs a lot more than a bunch of Mishra's Factories that have been reprinted 28 million times and a Standstill.
Standstill's had only one printing. So that card might actually be something.
Standstill has more than one printing. It has an IDW promo.
Ooh.
Oh, man.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Still is $5 for the promo, $2 for the
$5 promo.
Ooh.
And you got to play the Odyssey one anyway. Right?
I don't know, man. The promo does look pretty cool. Then again, I do have 4 Odyssey ones, so that's the one I'm going to play.
Yeah, I guess I should pull it up. But yeah, and I think like Mike said, it's going to be a process for a lot of people to switch decks. So it's possible that their short-term solution is I'll play Landstill or Stoneblade for a few months or even a year while I pull together these black, green, blue duels. And then they'll sort of emerge from their cocoon as like a bug butterfly and get to play as that. Yeah, I mean, fortunately, it doesn't seem like this ban is going to hit any of the people on this call all that hard financially. I think Elijah and Steven have the parts of Miracles, and Sam has various forms of Countertop. But none of us were banking on being Miracles players for the rest of our lives. So
Yeah, I will say my primary reasoning for not wanting Top to be banned was not because I believed it wasn't broken or anything like that. It's that I really enjoyed playing. Like, I played a Thopter sword build that had like ensnaring bridge and moat and humility, and I played all 4 blue duels so I could EE at 5, and I wanted to be able to do something cool like that again, but I also totally understand that the other ways of playing with Top are less interesting.
For me, I got all my enjoyment out of Top a while ago. I played against it more times than I can count, and played with it a bunch, so I'm kind of whatever towards it.
For me, most of the fun I had playing with Top was just naming it with Phyrexian Revoker.
I like this guy.
I mean, it's when you're thinking about why a card has to get banned, the fact that Revoker is one of the only ways to effectively deal with it kind of says something. I mean, it's like that and Needle and Croson Grip, right?
Yeah.
So,
which kind of leads me to my next question of, I think just about every deck had some sideboard cards, mostly there for Miracles. They may have come in other matchups, but those spots get freed up. So which of those do you expect to stay? Do you still expect people to have Pithing Needles in the sideboard, or do you think that card's going to see a downturn? Do you think, Storm is still playing Abrupt Decays in the board, or does that go? Because while it's still, these cards had applications in other matchups.
Oh, those cards specifically definitely do.
Yeah.
Like Pithing Needle is super broad and is an excellent answer to a lot of other things. Like, I mean, it obviously hits Deathrite. You can, if you play it, like, if you slam it at the exact right moment, you can like lock out people's fetches and just mana screw them for the rest of the game. And then also like Storm needs to kill stuff like Gaddock Teague or Thalia or other types of like hateful permanents.
Chalice.
But I'm trying to think of like specific cards that other decks run in sideboards that are only for Miracles. And like, honestly, it was a hard deck to attack. And I think most of the things that you could use to disrupt them are pretty like broad cards.
Well, I think that's just the nature of Legacy in general. Is like Pithing Needle. Maybe you'll play few of them, but like Pithing Needle still, like we said, gets Deathrite, which we just said is probably the next best card. And people like Gaddock Teague still gets Green Sun Zenith and Natural Order out of Elves, as well as a host of other spells. So I think maybe there's a few things that we will cut the number that we're playing of, but I don't think, unless there's a deck that just has a particularly awful Miracles matchup, I don't think there's any cards that will just be completely dropping out of sideboards.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. The non-generalized hate is all going to be cards that are only boarded in by decks that have like a truly god-awful Miracles matchup. Like if you look at something like Elves, lately they've been playing the big Nissa that got printed in Kaladesh. Maybe that's like the type of card that's going to get dropped from sideboards. But I don't see people significantly cutting down on cards like Pithing Needle or Abrupt Decay. Unless it's a card that they're really like shoehorning in badly. Steven, you mentioned the idea of Abrupt Decay and Storm, and that's something that they have to really stretch their mana base to include. So maybe they will decide at this point it's worth it to maybe be a little weaker to cards like Thalia and Chalice, but not have to include this fourth color.
I think like cards like Boseiju and Winter Orb are probably going to stop being played as much. Like Boseiju probably is going to disappear for at least the next few months.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's kind of,
Winter Orb maybe not as
definitely
much.
one of the most narrow cards that I've ever seen used specifically to get around Miracles.
Maybe like Winter Orb could be playable because there are a couple decks where it's good for, but I think like the card that suffers most is probably like Boseiju, and that's the only one I can think of.
Even like Cavern of Souls.
Well, I feel like Cavern of Souls probably still has applications to the decks that are interested in it, because Force of Will and Daze are both cards that are not going to see less play outside of Miracles. Delver is still a deck you have to be ready for.
Right.
Besides that, Cavern is also a 5-color land. And if you're in the kind of deck that's wanting to play Cavern, having a 5-color land that also gives your guys uncounterability is pretty strong.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. So, I think it's a hard question to answer, but it is really something where you have to look at both the specificity of the card and just how bad your Miracles matchup was in the first place.
I've actually got one more point on this that kind of just now occurred to me is one other thing that will change in terms of sideboards is we're only looking at the changes in terms of me versus Miracles. The metagame is going to shake out a lot. There's going to be a lot of things that change. There's going to be the top decks are definitely going to shuffle around. So that will be where you get a whole lot of change in your sideboards is because if, say, off the top of my head, just like say Elves becomes an awesome deck. Well, now I'm probably playing a lot more creature hate than I was before.
Yeah, but it'll definitely happen, but it's like really hard to say like what becomes better and worse because like GP Vegas, like the next big tournament, there's a lot of ways this can go. Maybe people start playing Maverick and Nick Fit again. Maybe we all just start playing Delver and Deathray Shaman variants again. So you're right, but who knows what's going to happen with that?
Which probably starts to lead into two of our next questions here. I think as a starting point, what do you guys think the meta is going to look like in the short term? For instance, maybe between now and GP Vegas, do you see it being just the current tier 1 decks get a little bit better and stay where they are, or are we going to see some really big shifts immediately?
I think kind of the one deck that may make a bit of a comeback would be Maverick, just because Maverick had such an atrocious Miracles matchup, but it is pretty good against Delver and has game against some of the unfair decks, what with Thalia and just being able to go pretty big pretty quickly. So I think that might give it a chance to shine in that it is so good against the fair decks.
I think another point is one of the big strengths of a counterbalance-based deck is that if you've got a high density of spells at a specific mana cost, they can just shut you out. So any deck that does that is going to get significantly better. The first that I would be most excited for would be High Tide. That's playing 75% of its castable spells are 1-drops. Another would be Elves getting even better just because there's no counterbalance to fight it. And then another one that I'm
Terminus.
Another one that I'm really interested to see is the potential for Zoo to return.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's completely crazy.
Back.
All right, fine.
I hate to break it to you, man.
Yeah, that's been a topic that's come up on the source, and I mean, there's a number of different legacy historians who have views on what exactly killed Zoo off.
Honestly,
I'm
the
not
reason
hopeful.
Mental misstep killed Zoo off.
Yeah, the reason Zoo died changes every 2 weeks. It's probably changed right now. I actually should go check.
Zoo is not dead. It just smells funny.
People who play Zoo smell funny. I'll confirm that.
Yeah, that's absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think personally what I'm expecting to see is just the bug decks really become pretty prominent for the next few weeks. Yep. But those feel to me easier to hate out than Miracles did. So I'm expecting that's just going to be a short-term shift, and when Bug is clearly the number 1 deck or the number 1 shell, people will start adjusting their boards and kind of beating up on it a bit, and they'll die back a little.
I think Painter's a big winner out of this. Naturally, a lot of people are going to... Well, I'd say for the short term, because a lot of people are naturally going to want to play these bug decks because that's right now considered the preeminent fair strategies. And Painter preys on a lot of those decks. Yeah, they don't have top anymore, but now their Blood Moons are a lot better. Now they don't have to reasonably expect to play Miracles twice in a large tournament, so they don't have to worry about having to, assuredly have 2 bad matchups in a tournament.
My sense is that the top ban affects them more heavily than that, and something like Dragon Stompy is probably going to be the less affected Moon deck, but maybe I'm wrong.
I think Painter is probably, just in a vacuum, Painter is probably a more powerful deck and a more consistent deck than Blood Moon Stompy. just because the nature of the win con is so much like easier to, it's so much like faster to kill and assemble. It doesn't necessarily even need Blood Moon. Like they can just go like turn 1 Grindstone, turn 2 Painter's Servant, and then like I don't know, like I guess you have to untap and then activate it, and then you win. Whereas Blood Moon Stompy is like you got to play a Blood Moon, and then you also have to like get your whatever your ham sandwich that you're going to use to beat them to death with, like, and that doesn't necessarily happen immediately.
That cat is pissed in the background.
I know. I should probably like go feed her or something. So
The cat is really upset that we're all predicting a return of mopey creature decks to Legacy.
Yeah, she is happy about the Prowling Serpapart print. Pretty cool. All right, I'll go deal with her. You guys can keep talking about Blood Moons.
What's another good winner?
Oh God, we don't have a leader. What will we do?
I'm gonna riot. It's time to pillage, burn.
Well, since we're talking about what's going to get better, maybe let's shift the conversation a little bit. And most of us in this chat have fairly wide-ranging collections and are able to make big choices, or are able to make lots of different choices. With Top Band, are you going to change decks anytime soon? And if so, what are you going to be changing to?
I think that with Top Band, I think now's the time to give Imperial Death and Taxes a try with the Magus of the Moon plan, rather than just the mono white version. I think, like we were talking about, bug decks are going to be everywhere. I agree that now's probably a good time for Blood Moon.
All right, Stuart, I'm fucking muting you. Sorry,
For me,
go ahead, Elijah.
for me, up until GP Vegas, because I think a lot of people are going to kind of play a lot of different things. Everybody's going to want to try and break the format. I'm just going to keep playing lands or whatever I feel like playing at a particular moment.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I've been playing Aggro Loam for like basically a year now straight. I haven't played any other decks. Probably won't change that just because, and I probably won't even change the list much. Even though Chalice is like one of the best things you can do against Miracles, it's just like such a powerful broad card in the format that I don't see any reason to play something besides Aggro, even though I do also love Maverick. I just think Aggro Loam is probably a better deck.
Aggro Loam is just good Maverick.
Yeah, basically. It's Maverick, but it has game against combo. Like,
Stuart, the question was, will you personally be changing decks? And if so, to what?
I won't be switching decks. I'll probably be adjusting my deck list.
What's there to adjust to Enchantress, though?
That's a good question. I think, this kind of loops back to our sideboard discussion earlier. I was devoting some spaces to things like City of Solitude and Choke. I also had like an Ulamog in the sideboard. And those are a number of cards that I'll probably stop running at this point. The difficult question there is not necessarily what I'm dropping from a deck like Enchantress, but what I would add in based on the new meta. If we see decks like Storm and Elves start to go nuts, I have to think about that and maybe include like Ley Lines or Swords to Plowshares, something like that.
Leyline's sweet. You can just play the Leylines deck.
This deck seems super powerful.
kill them on turn 1.
Get them.
There's no tournaments anymore, so yeah, I'll get there. No, yeah. So the 3 decks I've been playing for a while are Burn, Enchantress, and Mud. All 3 of which are like traditionally considered to have really strong Miracles matchups. So I'm not sure exactly where that leaves me as a player. One of the decks that I've preyed on is now not really around anymore. So I suppose I should reevaluate from that perspective, but I really enjoy all 3 decks, so my sense is I'm probably just going to keep playing them and make adjustments to try to do my best to beat whatever kind of arises in that power vacuum.
Ben, would you like to unmute yourself and answer the question?
Yeah, tell us about Crystal Brand.
We're being joined by Ben Kendrick, who you guys met on the last podcast.
Ben told his Uber driver to haul ass so he could broadcast from this motel. And he wants to get this cast off over with quickly because he's got a hooker in the bed right next to him.
So my normal tournament deck is Sneak and Show. I'm not changing. I think I think in the Power Vacuum, Sneak and Show is probably the deck to beat right now. I'm sure that some things will shake out. Something that's as easily hated out as Sneak and Show probably won't remain, in the top spot. But I don't think it's I don't think it's going anywhere. Some changes I'll make. I'm probably gonna cut Boseiju from my board. I'm thinking adding more Blood Moons and maybe a little more Death and Taxes hate or something. But that's.
Ooh.
Yeah, I'm thinking another Pyroclasm, another Causal Exoturn. They'll hit Death and Taxes and hit Elves, which I think is going to be coming back in a strong way. But not too much. I have to cut a Sensei's Divining Top from my deck. That's one definite change I have to make. But probably just replace that with a Preordain.
But I think we're all kind of floating in this weird space right now where we know that we no longer have to plan on miracles and we don't have to warp our decks around it, but we don't really know what's coming in both the short or long term.
So that was one of the questions I had put in our notes was, I think it's almost maybe easier to look at the long term, but this weekend, we actually will, almost all of us will be playing in a GPT. What do you play this weekend, both without the knowledge of how everything's developing and in order to maybe take advantage of this chaos, to take advantage of other people not knowing where things are going to be?
I think Ben's kind of got the right idea. You probably want to play something that is objectively very powerful. So Sneak and Show, because, I have turn 2 Crystal Brand. Can you deal with that? And a lot of these bug decks, like outside of Liliana, kind of do struggle with that, especially if it's resolved. Maybe like a lands, something powerful.
I was thinking Tin Fins, which Tin Fins is quite powerful. Your goal is to win every game in one turn, which you can do on the draw or the play off like 4 cards. So that's what I will be attempting to play this weekend.
Of course, you would sign up Children of Corliss deck.
I'm not actually going to be playing this weekend because I'm going to see my girlfriend in Ecuador, but if I wasn't, I would be playing Death and Taxes and definitely trying to find room for more Mirren Crusaders in the 75.
That card is so sweet.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that, he was bad against decks with Swords to Plowshares and or red removal, but there's just going to be a lot less of that, so I think it's time to go up to 2, maybe 3 in the 75.
Yeah, that seems sweet.
Do you still just play one Sanctum Prelate, or did you figure that out yet?
Yeah, I play 1 Prelate, 2 Recruiters. You can definitely get flooded on him. He's definitely bad in some matchups. You probably don't want to have, because you're never going to go below 4 Thalias in the main. You don't want to have 5. You don't want to have more than 5 of that hating on cheap spells type effect, because there's just a lot of matchups where it doesn't matter. And having the Recruiter.
Yeah, Whiteman was like, do you want to play more now? Because, there's going to be a lot more abrupt decays. Do you want to be playing another Sanctum Prelate?
I don't think so. I think just having the 1 you can go get with the Recruiter of Guard, because the first one is worth so much more than the second one.
Yeah.
I mean, I think to go off Elijah's point, what you want to do is either play a deck that's objectively really powerful, or you just want to play the deck that you're the most familiar with until we have more data and know exactly how we need to adjust. So
I think play the deck you're most familiar with is a piece of advice that everyone should take to heart. I know we've all sat around and told Sean, hey, don't change off Infect for this tournament. You are too good at it to try and go play another deck this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's something you should probably be following if you're going into any unknown meta. And I think for the time being, unknown metas are pretty much where everyone's at. So I'm expecting on a local level, we're probably just going to see a lot of experimentation from a lot of people, but also maybe with Miracles gone, people are just going to bring out their old decks that they loved. So during that sort of Wild West atmosphere, you should just be playing what you know. In my case, I am planning on coming to the GPT this weekend, and I think I'm going to play Mud. But it's probably not the right call in a format full of black-green X, but I at least know how to pilot it well.
So that actually makes me think of another question real quick. We talked about what are the Miracles pilots going to switch into? And we talked about people who only have Miracles. If you only have Miracles, but you still want to come out this weekend, what is your deck going to look like? Are you just going to like jam some Gitaxian probes where those tops were and take out a couple Miracles and put in some Wraths?
I think I just wouldn't show up.
I mean, we'll see people who do that. Maybe not necessarily at a specific event, but there will be people who attempt it.
I think the best way to attempt the direct port would probably be you cut the Miracles and the countertop package for some Supreme Verdict, some counter spells, some spell snares, maybe a spell piercer too, and try and play almost draw go type control like you would see in like a standard format. If you're just hell bent on doing that this weekend.
Yeah, stack 4 mentors in there and and try and play mentor control.
Didn't you hear mentor control is dead because Gush is restricted?
We'll get to that later.
Yeah, the sense I get, and like obviously everyone's really dramatic on the source always, but all the Miracles
You don't say.
they're treating this as like this really big seismic upheaval for them, and like I think a lot of Miracle players are being like, should I just sell out of Magic or what? So I'm guessing there won't be that many people who exclusively play Miracles and are deciding to come out, a few days later and just like jam a mentor deck. I think a lot of them are probably going to be spending a few weeks thinking about what they want to do and maybe building towards their next move. So my guess is we aren't going to see them for a little bit.
The good news is that most Miracles players have a lot of experience not knowing what to do while they just stare at their top 3 cards.
Yeah, it seems like not too many tears being shed for Miracles on this podcast, but
This is a direct buff to all the people that played Miracles that would just play it because like, oh, it's the best deck, but they really didn't know what they were doing, so now they have to play something else.
I'm actually concerned with people porting over to Stoneblade. I think that's a worse matchup for some combo decks. I think it was worse for Sneak and Show, so Meddling Mage is a lot harder for me to deal with than Countertop, and the Stoneforge package puts a good clock on. So
Yeah, but even like, is like Stoneblade in himself good enough? Like, people are going to play it, but is like that deck actually going to be good enough? Because there's been a lot of like there are people that talk about like that really hasn't been that good in years, not necessarily because of Miracles, but just because in and of itself it's not that good.
I thought it was fine. I played it for a while. The biggest problem was that it had the same favorable and unfavorable matchups as Miracles did, and then got stomped by Miracles. So there's no reason to play it.
Well, I think
it's a force of will deck with a clock. So in that sense, I think it's probably a better corollary for it would just be it's kind of bad Delver rather than bad Miracles. I don't see, if we're talking about this from a spiky perspective, I don't see a lot of reason to play it over a Delver deck.
I think it's a little different than Delver. It's definitely more on the controlling side than Delver. You're not really trying to, choke their mana and race them out. You're trying to control the board.
Well, we're getting into the very specifics of what it means to be controlling versus something else. So we might call blue-white controlling and Delver decks tempo. And these get into these really narrow things that when we get into these things at a bar, I just say, it's time to order some more beer.
Definitely. Thanks.
Speaking of more beer.
What are we all drinking again?
I am drinking Brash Pussy Wagon that was put in this crowler yesterday at our vintage tournament held at the Metal Brewery where they were having a car show and motorcycle show. Go check out the pics on the Mana Drain. It's awesome.
I feel like you had this rehearsed.
No, I didn't. I just really like to brag about our vintage scene.
Why wouldn't you?
I'm on the St. Arnold's lawnmower.
Weak.
It was in my fridge. Everyone chill.
We're from Houston. We think you're weak.
Yeah.
You think we'd support a Houston beer, but we don't.
You think that regardless. Like, I live in Austin.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you...
Steven, what are you drinking?
I am drinking a gluten-free cider left at my house by Sky Goy. who's a Miracles player. So
Oh, I know
in
him.
honor of him.
You're drinking his beer too, huh? Man.
Yeah.
Hey, it's
He's a
not
rough
beer.
day,
Let's
guy.
be clear. Mike, what are you drinking?
Get a Shocky.
I'm drinking coffee because I woke up 45 minutes ago because I work nights now and I sleep from like 11 a.m. till 7 or 8.
Interesting. So you've been dreaming about Top being banned and you woke up and you're like, holy shit.
I actually did have a dream about Magic today, which is really weird. It was really strange though because I was like playing at our local store. I had a round 1 match, but game 1 took forever. And then like my opponent was like, oh man, I gotta like do all this stuff. And then I like get up and I walk around for a second and I look at the clock and it's like, man, this round has been over for 10 minutes. My opponent doesn't realize it and thinks it's still round 1 and doesn't realize that time is gone. And everybody else is like trying to find their opponents. And then I see Stu sitting there. He's like, who's your opponent? And he's like, well, it's that guy you're playing. But I was like, well, we're still in round 1. It was just like a very mundane but like surreal dream. I don't know.
So did you
Sounds
have
like Miracles?
so-
Yeah.
So when you woke up, did you have like this weird premonition like you were Obi-Wan from Star Wars where you're like, I just heard a million people cry out in pain?
That was probably what caused the dream.
A million
Just
senseis.
The psychic energy that's been flowing through the internet. Yeah, I don't know.
But if
Elijah,
you read
what
the
do you-
Miracles thread is what that sounds like.
Elijah, what are you drinking?
Yellow Rose.
Excellent choice. Ben, what are you drinking?
I'm drinking water from the tap since I'm at a hotel I just got here.
Interesting.
Wonderful.
Well, that's exciting.
Mhm.
So I think before we get into vintage, I wanted to more broadly ask each of you, do you personally think that this change makes Legacy better or worse?
Maybe.
I don't
Yeah,
think I
so
can
see your
answer
phone.
it yet. I'm not sure. I need to collect data before
I'm going to go ahead and give it a firm yes, this makes Legacy better. Because as someone who is just not a fan of playing with the blue cantrips, it's just a bad play pattern. You know, if somebody's playing 4 Ponders, 4 Brainstorms, probably 3 times a game, you're going to have to sit there and watch your opponent look at their top 3 cards or look at their hand with 3 more cards in it, where your only job is to sit there for 60 seconds before you call a judge for slow play and just make sure they're not cheating. Whenever there's and that's, you know, we accept that because that's just part of Legacy. When top is in play, you get to sit there and watch them maybe 10 times a game. So I think just getting rid of some of that play pattern is a net good thing for Legacy.
I kind of have the opinion that, like, regardless of whether or not, like, Miracles was too good or not, I think at this point it's very clear nothing was going to change. I mean, Eldrazi got printed. Nothing really changed after about a couple months. Leovold came out and supposed to be this really good grindy deck. Nothing really changed. So even if, like, let's grant that Miracles wasn't too good, something had to change because nothing was going to. It didn't look like anything was going to change.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna see a hole in the metagame get filled that's the size of 1/10 of the metagame roughly. So I think it's really hard to predict what's going to happen as far as besides the fact that there are certain decks that are still very good right now, and we're still going to see those decks. But like the actual like kind of metagame like it's an ecosystem. So like this is going to cause like a cascade effect through it, kind of with what decks people play and what decks are good, and it's always ever changing. Even though Legacy is very slow moving.
One thing that I think will be really cool is you will have an entire large group of people who are changing decks. You will also have a lot of people, changing their own decks because of metagame shifts and so forth. And a lot of people, myself included, complained when Star City cut their Legacy series because for lots of reasons, but there's no large-scale tournaments anymore. And now we've got months until Vegas, and all of the tournaments are going to be, relatively small GPT-sized tournaments. So the Vegas results should be really interesting because there should be a fair amount of people who are bringing stuff that was, good in their local metagame, and they think it will be good against the grand metagame, and let's see what happens at Vegas. So, we could, my bet with Tim that he would not make day 2, I may end up having to pay him $1 American, which would be very unfortunate. But I think that an increasing diversity is always good, and there will be a lot of people. I also think it's fun to be able to try all these decks. When I was working for the game store, I got my entry fee paid for, so I played a ton of shitty decks that were a lot of fun. And there's a lot of people who are going to be forced to have that same kind of fun of going in with what they've brought that's maybe not the best, but it's what they came up with that day.
You're going to have fun, and you're going to like it.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think that the writing was kind of on the wall, as Elijah said, that nothing was going to ever change if this change didn't happen. You had pros kind of hopping on the Miracles over the last few months when it was clear that that was the bit deck to be on. And there was, various new printings came out that didn't do anything to move it from being the tier 1 number 1 deck.
On the subject of new printings, real quick, Harsh Mentor punishes the fuck out of top, and we will never, ever, ever see a real Legacy result where that happened.
Yeah, it's a little bit
So
hard.
I think the counterpoint to that is that Harsh
Legacy
Mentor
be a Harsh Mentor.
is a 2-mana 2/2 that dies to literally every removal spell in Miracles. So if there was a deck equipped to deal with a 2-mana 2/2, it was probably Miracles.
Look,
Yeah, it
Steven,
doesn't even
get
get
out
the
of here with your logic.
It doesn't even get the return like Eidolon does of when they Swords to Plowshare and it hits them for 2. They can just clean these swords in and it's gone. But if they burn their swords in their hand on your Mentor and then you slam an Eidolon next turn, fine with that.
Yeah. We'll never know.
Mm-hmm. But everyone's here is predicting that Elves gets a lot better, and notice that Harsh Mentor also punishes the fuck out of Elves too.
Good point.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it's still
That
good
is just
card.
doesn't have abilities.
Yeah.
But I mean, if it
Elves
kills,
and Death and Taxes are the two that Harsh Mentor hits the worst, and they're probably both stand to gain a lot in this new meta.
Death and Taxes is activated ability deck.
Basically.
As is Maverick.
yeah.
I mean, Knight has the alternate mode of just swinging.
Yeah, it is like basically an 11/11 for 3 half the time, so that's pretty good.
It's like this good.
I prefer my 15/15 for 3, but it's just me.
No one else does. Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I think it's hard to tell if the meta is going to get better or worse, but I'm personally just excited for the next few weeks and months and just kind of seeing what happens. I got back into playing Magic in 2014, and Legacy has been very similar for the whole time. There was a brief period with Dig Through Time and Treasure Cruise, but other than that, there haven't been any significant changes. And now it's just going to be theoretically completely different. So that should be fun and exciting for everyone at the least.
Yeah, reading on Reddit and the source and the people that aren't in hysterics over the top panel, there does seem to be people that are interested in just the fact the format's changing, not necessarily that they think it's going to be a good thing, but because it is going to be different. So I think there is some excitement for that. But we'll have to see if that's how this is going to pan out exactly. Because it's theoretically possible it could be worse.
Oh, definitely is. Definitely is. Miracles kept a lot of those unfair decks in check, so if the policeman is gone here, then it could get out of control, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder what the next police deck becomes. My guess, as some other people have said, is Delver, which to me seems fine at keeping unfair jacks in check.
I think Delver is already because here's something about Delver that I think sometimes gets overlooked is that there's lots of different flavors of Delver decks, but if you put them all together, because they all have basically the same game plan, they made up equal or greater percentage of the metagame than Miracles did at pretty much any time in the last couple of years.
I think at one point I did add up all the different percentages of the Delver decks for I think an SCG Invitational. It was 25% of the whole tournament, which was far higher than Miracles.
Aggro control, tempo is Legacy. I think it's true. It's actually what defines this format. It doesn't really exist in any other format, at least in such prominence.
The Delver decks do have a surprising amount of different good and bad matchups between them. They're not very they're not as similar as you'd think, just classifying them all as Delver.
There's also definitely something to be said for if you play 5 Delver decks in a row, you are probably going to have at least 3 different experiences. If you play 5 Miracles decks in a row, you're going to go home and cut your balls off. And it's going to be because you're going to have played the same game at least 10 times.
Mm-hmm. And all of those games were slow as death.
Well, not if you're playing Tin Fins.
Fair enough.
They might all end game 1 when you go to time, so maybe it's only 5 games. But
Yeah.
Look, when I played Miracles, I personally enjoyed making sure the game went to time if somebody didn't want to scoop when I had won the game. So I came out satisfied.
Oh yeah, I love the you can't win. Why don't you scoop? Fuck you. You can't win. Why don't you scoop?
yeah,
Hey, I brought snacks. You didn't.
That was a legit debate when you're playing a fast deck. This happened to me several times where I win game 1, say playing Burn against Miracles, and game 2 they get the countertop lock it down. Well, I'm going to sit there and make them kill me so that we start game 3 with 10 minutes left. You know, you have barely any chance of winning in 10 minutes, but I do. So
well, besides that, you might be able to take them to time in game 1 and just win the classic 101.
Right, yeah.
The old land strategy.
Unfortunately, I can't sit there.
Only winning with a 3-2, so that's going to crush game 1.
Well, it seems like we're all on relatively similar pages here. And again, I think maybe the biggest takeaway is that we don't really know what's going to be happening. But does anyone else have any kind of final thoughts on this?
So I think final thoughts roundtable, and you get 30 seconds.
Seems fair.
Who wants to go first?
I'll take
Got
it.
it.
I think this is an overall good thing for Legacy, just because it's going to improve the play pattern. We're going to see more decks kind of get the chance to develop. And do want to say sorry to all the 12 post players out there, because that's the only deck I can think of that this also.
And then he dropped. The 12 post players must have heard him.
Yeah, they came for him.
They're coming.
Mic drop.
Ben, how about your thoughts? 30 seconds. Final thoughts on a top ban.
I didn't think a ban was needed, but I am happy it happened because I really dislike playing Miracles, and I'm excited for the new metagame. I think it's way too early to tell whether this is a good or a bad thing, but it'll be an interesting thing either way.
Yeah.
You still have 15 seconds, so feel free to just talk bullshit.
I concede my time here. Concede.
Mike, how about you?
Well, I mean, let's pour one out for Sensei's Divine Top, anyways, because I've heard a lot of people say, "Oh, I don't think the ban was needed." It's like Miracles as a deck like ruined top for everybody else, unfortunately. So now nobody gets to play with kind of generic consistency fixing that can go in any deck. So Nick Fit. It was a test. Doomsday is now unplayable. We didn't really touch on that.
Never playable?
Well, okay. Now you really cannot play it. You just can't play it. I don't know.
That's sad. That's the saddest result here.
Some decks will adapt. They'll fill the slot, but some decks depend on it. Like I don't know.
All right, you're at like 40 seconds.
A lot of really bad decks worse. Anyways. Yeah.
He's taking Ben's 15.
Oh, okay. Elijah, go.
This is my thought.
This is your thought.
And he's drinking
Yeah,
beer.
you had to drink beer for 30 seconds, but oh well.
I don't
know
have
if you
any
had
thoughts,
enough
really.
for that.
Go nuts, Stu.
Yeah, I guess I feel some sympathy for anyone who lost money on this ban. Be that Miracles players or like Painter players or Doomsday or 12 Post. And also for anyone who just really all they wanted to do was play hard control. It sucks that may or may not be viable. But I think it was clear that Miracles was going to be the top deck for the foreseeable future and that there needed to be some change. So it might have been a more drastic change than we needed, but at least we're going to have an exciting new world ahead of us here.
That was great timing also.
Nice.
All right, I'm going to see if I can do it in 30 seconds. Ready, go. First, any Miracles player who went into a BNR announcement and did not expect top to be banned, was just out of their fucking mind to start with. Secondly, when top was banned in Modern, they gave this reasoning that it slows down tournaments. If that's true, then it's true in every tournament format, and it should have been universally banned across all formats anyway. 3, if the problem is Miracles is too strong, Terminus should have been banned. If the problem is that tournaments are going too long, top should be banned. But we should just apply slow play penalties. No one applies slow play penalties. People should apply slow play penalties. That's 30 seconds on the dot.
That was a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I have a notepad next to me for all of that.
I like how there were
I
like
think you should finish your beer now.
there were like multiple bombshells in that rant that we didn't cover any of them on the rest of the talk.
We'd be here for 4 hours discussing that.
I know.
Well, I can tell you, if you go to the bar with me and ply me with a few beverages and then start asking me about Magic, you get those, except they're like 10,000 words per point.
All right, I'll
There's
test
also a
that.
significant
You'll just
usage
believe me on that
as
one.
Yeah. Well, yeah, guys, I'm glad we could do this kind of emergency talk about this here. I think after this, we'll probably get back to more regular intervals between casts.
More bad card discussion.
Yeah, more discussion of Sandworm Convergence after this. But
Convergence discussion
on the last call. But yeah, so,
I watched it. You were there.
but yeah, guys, thanks for coming on. I think from here, Sam and Ben, we're going to talk a bit about the vintage changes, which are pretty exciting. I'll probably drop off since I don't have too much to say about it. But regardless, yeah, good chatting here, guys.
And if you're watching and or listening and you're only interested in Legacy, I do want to throw out one more piece of information before you stop this podcast and delete it from your phone and unsubscribe forever. Not this weekend, but next weekend, May 6th. That's next weekend, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
a week from this weekend.
A week from this coming weekend. Local Magic player Drew Fetter. Is that his last name?
Yeah.
I'm awful. He recently just got over leukemia, and Asgard Games is hosting a fundraiser for him. We're going to have, I know we'll have a Legacy tournament. There's a rumor we'll have a Vintage tournament. We're going to have a whole bunch of stuff. I know we've got at least one Magic artist coming out and doing some signings. Should be a really good time. If you're in the Texas area or maybe as far as, southern Oklahoma and western Louisiana, come on out. It should be a good time. We will also be playing Vintage the next day at a brewery with unlimited proxies, and it is always a good time.
Basically, if they have one, at worst, we'll be at a game store with a bar. But at best, we're going to be at a brewery at playing Vintage.
There will be beer on both days.
Definitely.
Yes, also the game store sells beer, so.
Cool. Well, yeah, I'll probably be there for the one this weekend. So, all right, guys.
All right.
Later.
This is where, if I knew how to do it, we'd have like a little 30 or 45 seconds of music to tide us over while we waited for the Vintage talk. All right, who's getting off the call?
I am.
I will see you guys later. This has been fun.
Take care.
Enjoy Vintage.
See you,
Well,
Mike.
Ben, it looks like it's just you and me.
Sounds
Hold on.
good.
I've got to scroll up to my notes. I took good notes, too. God damn, fucking scroll bar going slow as shit. All right, so Vintage change. Gitaxian Probe and Gush are banned. Kind of, I think, well, unusual is maybe not the right word. There's restricted, rather. Restrictions are pretty rare in Vintage. A double restriction is really interesting. The stated reason is essentially that Mentor is fucking great. Initial thoughts before we get into it.
I was really surprised. I thought if their whole description was, well, Mentor is too powerful, Mentor is too powerful, Mentor is too powerful. Let's restrict 2 cards that aren't Monastery Mentor. And by the way, one of the ways the Mentor is broken is with Paradoxical Outcome, and let's leave that alone too.
But before we go too far down that rabbit hole, I will say that was one of my thoughts is, I think Chalice was incorrectly banned out of workshops because they didn't want to ban a creature. And I think this is probably the exact same thing, that we are banning Gush and Probe because we don't want to ban Mentor. Also, I'm going to incorrectly say ban instead of restricted for the entire length of this conversation.
I usually try and use the word hit rather than ban just because it works for both. So,
real quick, we didn't answer this question. We had a little discussion about this beforehand. Is the discussion of the restriction of Gush and Probe, at least for our sakes, as players who are not the best and who are not going to spend 4 hours on it, like I'm sure Steve and Kevin will, like tomorrow, is this one conversation or two?
I think it's really one. They were really going after the same thing with both these cards. They're both similar cards. They're free in quotations. Cantrips, draw spells, hit for the same reason, really.
Yeah, they definitely do that. But like one of the points that Sean O'Brien has made ad infinitum is that the knowledge that Gitaxian Probe gives you is so valuable, and it's like Gitaxian Probe is knowledge. It's three things: knowledge, storm, and cycling. And like Street Wraith is not going to be played more. Like the cycling is not the reason that it was good. It was the storm, and then to a slightly lesser extent the information. Yeah, and I'm in my paradoxical storm list, which I will freely admit I just totally copied. I think I'm playing one piece of discard, but I'm playing 4 Gitaxian Probes, and I have found that a lot of times the Gitaxian Probe kind of plays the role of the discard in that it lets me know whether I'm clear or not. Or even if I'm not clear, it lets me know, okay, throw this out. If they counter it, now I'm good to go.
Right. And that's kind of the same reason I play, getting back to Legacy, I play Gitaxian Probes in my Sneak and Show list, and a lot of people don't like it, but there's so many ways you can play around things if you know they have Force of Will, and then when you have a probe and you probe them and there's nothing there, you can, this just made my life easier for the low cost of 2 life. So
yeah, for sure. It was
not to be underrated.
I will say, like, sometimes Gitaxian Probe almost became frustrating in that, like, playing with Storm, I would probe them, they would have nothing, and I'd be like, Mox. Yeah, resolves. Lotus. Yeah, resolves. Do you have any way to stop me? Because please, I can go off in like a minute if you just let me go.
Just write F6 on your notepad and put it on the table, right? So, I mean, I guess we should talk about whether we think these were the right call here, right? Whether these restrictions were correct, both the wrong cards completely. What do you think?
Well, I'm kind of biased in a couple things. I have written 4,000 words about how Young Pyromancer is my favorite Magic card ever printed. Unfortunately, the sons of bitches who run my server company took away my server just because I didn't pay my bill, which is totally unfair. And I thought, a restricted Mentor could make for a really interesting format in that you could have Pyromancer decks come back, but there would be a difference between a Pyromancer deck and a Mentor deck, because you could have like just straight up Blue-Red Delver, which was an excellent deck for a while, and then like splash just a little bit, like, I don't know, maybe 2 swords and a Mentor or something, and that would have been really interesting.
I mean, you could just run your very similar, Gush Mentor shell, but splash red and put 4 Pyromancers in there, and it's much less powerful, but it's probably manageable at that point, but it's a similar deck.
I also found in general that Young Pyromancer games, you might make 20 elementals and, you're only hitting for 3 a turn. And
that doesn't happen.
One of the things I really disliked playing Mentor kind of felt like cheating. After playing Young Pyromancer, definitely felt like cheating. I also personally never thought the deck was that good, but that was because there were a lot of people who played Mentor really poorly. I cannot count the number of times someone tapped out for Mentor and I either forced it or bolted it and was like, that was sweet. Thanks for just giving me a time walk.
So, I mean, what do you think about the Gush restriction here? You think that was the right call?
Well, it is worth noting that Gush has now been, correct me if I'm wrong, restricted, unrestricted, restricted, unrestricted, restricted. Is that correct?
I believe that's right. That's why I've been joking here that it's only going to be restricted for the next 2 years or so. But we'll see Gush Mentor back in a couple years in the unrestricted Gush, right?
Well, I could see it as WotC has said that they want to be more active with bannings, unbannings, and to that end, we now have 8 ban restricted list updates a year. I could totally see Mentor still being good, especially because paradoxical, you're only cutting a couple cards. Sean O'Brien just popped into the chat and said third time restricted.
Third time.
Yeah, that was correct. But I could totally see, like paradoxical mentor is not losing that much. I could totally see a mentor restriction and later, well, we restricted this because of mentor, let's unrestrict Gush again. And
right.
And then Steve would release another 600-page ebook and
see, a paradoxical mentor is much more fragile than Gush mentor, though, in terms of if they slam a null rod on you, you're pretty much fucked, right? Does the paradoxical mentor deck have a way out to a null rod?
An already resolved mentor, I think.
Okay, sure, right. Yeah, if they already have a mentor, and well, I guess they don't need all the tokens right away, but it really hurts. Whereas Gush mentor got around that. Null rod also has the advantage of it kind of hoses the Ravager Shops deck, which is the other top deck. So I'm kind of expecting to see a lot more null rods here in our future.
Well, yeah, especially now that I imagine mentor will still be good, and now there's only one mentor deck, and there's one single thing about it that is very easy to hate.
Right.
I added a new guest, by the way. Surprise.
Oh, who's this? You're upside down.
He's not upside down. He's currently on the moon. He's also muted himself, apparently. Sean, unmute yourself, dumbass.
I'm unmuted. All right.
There you go.
There we are.
Welcome to
It's
Sean.
always polite to enter a new chat muted.
Welcome to Sean O'Brien, who I'm sure is just absolutely heartbroken that both Jataxian Probe and Gush have been restricted. I can see the tears in your eyes.
We got some lag going on here, huh?
Just a tad bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm lagged a little bit. I apologize. I should get a better internet connection. Yeah, supervillain team up. Tusk and
Hearing his echo like a full fucking minute later.
Yeah, it's quite a bit.
God damn it, Sean! Isn't like having good internet your job? And he dropped. All right. Well, that's all right. So I'm going to pull up our notes now and talk about these questions. We said how much worse is the mentor deck is one of our questions, which it seems both you and I have said not much worse.
The paradoxical mentor deck is not going to be much worse. The Gush mentor deck might have a little more trouble. I mean, it really lost 6 cards, right? It lost 4 Gushes and 4 probes.
Well, and even a lot of Gush probe decks weren't playing the full 4/4. There just simply wasn't room for them. A lot of them were playing 3/3 or 4/3 or even like 4/2.
I hadn't noticed. I thought they were all stacked on the 4.
Yeah, I always thought that was wrong, but
yeah, it seems wrong to me. But I guess I'm not a mentor pilot. The probe restriction though bugged me a little bit. I think probe was it was used in decks like TPS that are really, they're far from being a problem right now and are also a really cool part of the vintage metagame, which I would
imagine that as Gush control leaves the format, that storm decks become more strong until the rest of the format catches up in the form of probably mana drain decks.
That's true. It's really tough to say exactly how it'll shake out. The other thing is whether does this increase Shop's presence in the metagame or decrease it like Wizards?
Well, this is that thing where we're talking about immediate versus long term. I think
immediate. I think everyone's gonna be playing Shops, right?
Yeah. Well, especially given no cost associated with changing between the two of them. So, for example, in our 100% proxy tournaments, we're playing on Magic the Gathering, online, digital objects, etc. I could definitely see Shops being more and more played.
But that's the same thing that happened last year when Lodestone Golem got restricted. I mean, the Gush was more than half of the metagame for a couple months, and then of course
I don't think that's accurate, but okay.
It was huge for a couple months, and then it obviously started calming down when people.
Well, there's also a discussion to be had, perhaps, about what it means for something to be a part of the metagame, and I think Gush being a large percentage of the metagame is similar to Gush is a large percentage, and you have like Gush. Back in the day, you had Gush, Drain, Workshop, Bazaar, and essentially, right? Is that it's okay for something like Gush to be a large percentage of the metagame, but like most Gush decks now were becoming Mentor decks, which we just come right back around to. Right. Should Mentor have been the restriction?
Right. There wasn't much reason to play a non-Mentor blue deck.
Well,
in this meta, except maybe Oath of Druids, if you count that as a blue deck.
There was not much reason to play a non-Mentor Gush in air quotations deck.
Right. Well, what other blue decks are it?
I mean, there were Gush Storm decks, there were Gush Oath decks, but generally, if you were playing Gush, the correct way to go was to play Mentor, and yeah, I think that's the sum of it, really.
Yeah. I mean, you can look on MTG Goldfish or MTG Top 8 and look at the results, and it's pretty clearly dominant Mentor at the top, along with Shops.
So let's get to the next question on our notes. What else is splash damaged by a Gush Gitaxian Probe restriction?
We already talked about Storm. We're not sure if that's, the meta easing up on Storm might help, but it obviously gets hit by the Probe restriction. Probe is great in that deck.
It's also worth noting that it is much harder to go off when you don't have 4 spells that for free let you know what your opponent's doing. Even if it didn't draw a card, that would still be okay.
Right. I mean, Probe is like the perfect Storm card, isn't it? It's the perfect free.
Storm card.
No, it's a perfect card for Storm. It's free. It builds Storm and it gives you info. Draws a card. You would never run fewer than 4 probes in a Storm deck if you had the option. I can't see a reason why you would ever do that.
So the topic of what else is hurt, like I said, my beloved Pyromancer deck is certainly hurt.
Sure.
I wasn't even running, I don't think I was running any probe in my last Pyromancer deck, but I've also been running lots of other random shit.
Right.
Probably some fringe strategies.
In terms of Gush?
I'm trying to think what else. Yeah. Well, Probe is, it slots into every deck.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Gush. There are lots of, I won't say fringe, but not top tier decks that Gush went into that no longer exist, which is the same thing could be said for top.
Sure.
We can get right back to the Terminus should have been banned over top because top at least is used in other decks.
Yeah.
I mean, Gush was played in actual Storm decks before all the Delve mess and all of the Dak Faden and the Token mess. And those decks were, I would say, tier 1.5. If you look at like Bazaar of Moxen results from, let's say, the period before cons, but after like New Phyrexia, Gush was not dominating at all. The dominant blue decks were bug decks, which preyed on the shop decks.
Mm-hmm.
And then the big blue decks like Bazaar of Moxen got won by Tezzerator, for example, and that just jumped over the Abrupt Decay deck to present basically, not big giant non-decayable things like Jace and Tezzeret. And Gush sat in the middle, and like for 2 years straight at Bazaar, the only Gush decks were one Doomsday deck and one Gush Storm deck. And when I say Gush Storm, I mean like Fast Bond Gush
Fast
Storm.
Bond.
Yeah,
Fast
exactly.
Bond's the other splash hate here. I can't see anything running Fast Bond without.
Yeah, that's actually the next question on my notes is what is splash damaged by this? Because obviously this is aimed at Mentor. What is splash damaged, which is kind of what we've been discussing here.
Lotus Cobra, Mana Gorger Hydra, Gush Storm, Doomsday. I mean, all those decks weren't particularly competitive, but they're interesting. And the token strategies sort of killed them off, but now this is certainly the nail in the coffin. For example, you could play Mana Gorger Bug and then hedge your sideboard with like Virulent Plagues literally coming out of your asshole to beat Mentor. And it was a cool deck and it was fun, and it wasn't obviously wasn't as good as Mentor, but those are I would say those are dead. And yeah, if Fast Bond, unless you're going to play like Vintage Strip Mine, Crucible.
Yeah, Crucible.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. Let's do that, please.
Yeah, I kind of want to do that now.
Yeah, actually, just a random thought. The first article written about Mentor that I saw for Vintage was by Sean, and it was Monk. It was called Bulletproof Monk, and it was an artifact deck, which is kind of what we're saying with Paradoxical Outcome. That Monk probably just or not Monk, Mentor probably just becomes an artifact deck, even if it's not a Paradoxical Outcome deck.
I was just playing tops. I mean,
you were playing tops. You were playing Trinket Mage, and you were just like playing a bunch of great value artifacts. And that deck was super sweet. I still have it. Well, I had it built on Moto until 10 minutes ago when I traded away my whole collection.
It also played Cavern. So I think if you're gutting Gush, you're just replacing. Let's say you're playing 3 Gush. Maybe you play a Cavern. Now, or you move an island into a Cavern. You play an extra Cavern, and now all of a sudden the skill testing. The skill tester of Cavern, Human, Monk. Misstep your misstep to misstep the misstep that misstep the Swords of Plowshares is probably what a lot of the matchups are going to come down to. My preference was to hit all the Phyrexian mana spells because I felt like there was 2 years of Gush that Gush was not the best deck, and the big blue decks never had a chance to breathe because we got hit with Delve. Well, Phyrexian mana was lurking, and I think it was only a matter of the token generators that pushed Phyrexian mana over the top. Like Mental Misstep is miserable, but when you have a token generator out, Mental Misstep becomes miserable.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like halfway through that, you said something that made me think something that you just said, which was like Mental Misstep was not a 4 of always. Like when Mental Misstep was printed, my friend was running a big blue deck, and he was running 1 Misstep. And like, if you told someone now you were running 1 misstep, they would go, "Oh, I didn't hear that got restricted."
I mean, I think a lot of times it's reasonable to run fewer missteps, but that's because it's a dead card versus shops. I'll almost never run more than 3. That's about the max. I run 2 most of the time. Yeah, I mean, the misstep restriction idea is interesting because it just kind of eases up spots in everyone's deck, it seems like, right?
Well, I like the idea of the misstep restriction from the point of view of, look, now you will stop playing 4 mental misstep in your main deck and then complaining that you are unable to counter spells that are cast off Mishra's Workshop. And I am talking to one very specific person on the internet.
Yeah, I remember seeing a deck with 4 missteps, 2 main deck red blasts, and 2 main deck Flusterstorms, and they're saying, "Well, we can't beat shops."
And he tweeted complaining that shops was too good with 8 cards that did absolutely 0 things against shops. That's where I am in terms of a mental misstep restriction, is that it will open up deck building and maybe
Yeah, it might actually hurt shops.
Yeah, I agree.
People won't play it. I think it's a maybe. I'm not saying definitely it'll hurt shops, but having your opponent have fewer dead cards against you is bad for you, right?
Yeah, that was one of my on Tusk Talk. One of my main points was that if you restricted mental misstep, that the average shop matchup would go up for the blue stew decks. Like, if they just become Flusterstorm, Pyroblast, that's obviously not the case. But then you're talking about real diehards. But I mean, if those become
I gotta imagine you're running some pierces and some snares in that place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Or a Gentleman's Lightning Bolt or whatever. I mean, like, if you look at, I just pasted some results in. If you look at the sort of the curve over, starting with like Bazaar of Mox in 2013. These are some of the biggest vintage tournaments, paper tournaments that have taken place in the history of mankind. Gush is barely a fart, in the back of church in 2013, and it's in Doomsday, and it's in Drain Tendrils, and that's it.
Drain Tendrils, fuck yeah.
Yeah, so that's like every blue restricted card, fast bond for Gush. I'm talking about like repeal style Gush Tendrils, and then the next year you get in 2013. So now you're in the fall. again, you get 2 Gush decks out of the top 8, and then they're both in Storm. One is Talrand, which he had sort of a short life.
I remember Talrand.
Well, Talrand just stopped existing when the card Young Pyromancer was formed.
Yeah. And then the other...
I used to play it in my Pyromancer deck, man.
4 mana in a Pyromancer deck? Get the fuck out.
Yeah, no, it was solid when you got a little mana flooded or something, or you could land it. It was a little high end. It was almost like a more powerful Pyromancer at the top of your curve. It wasn't bad.
Yeah, it's a fast clock once it lands, but it was an expensive clock.
It ends it, yeah.
But that was pretty much it, and that was September 2013, right? These are 100-person events, and then it starts to sort of go downhill, and the homogeny starts to set in. But even as late as spring of 2014. So that's the biggest Bazaar of Mox, and that was like 220-person paper vintage event. You have no Gush in the top 8.
Right.
The top 2 blue decks are Tezzerator and just straight up Jace control. And then you have the fish decks or the bugfish decks that are preying on the shop decks.
Mm-hmm.
So real quick,
who made the point earlier about like 2 mental missteps? That was you, Sam? Or So like if you look at those top 8 decks, Bazaar of Mox in spring 2014. You've got a deck playing 2 mental misstep and 2 steel sabotage wins that event, right?
I guess you also, though, at that time don't have 4 preordain in most blue decks.
Yeah.
You don't, because you don't have token generators, and you don't have 12.
Well, I think you also just don't have. I think you also just don't have preordain printed yet.
So 2013. Yeah, spring of 2014. I think we have preordain.
When was Mentor printed? Was that 2014 or 2015?
That was Fate Reforged.
2015, like January, right, for Fate Reforged. Yeah.
Yep. You got it. But it's funny to look at these results. So, I mean, you have Gush just being sort of a tier 1.5, tier 2 strategy, and then the bottom falls out, and then by we get Young Pyromancer. He comes pretty close to Dak. I believe that Dak comes in June.
Dak comes, I think, 4 to 6 months later.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So Dak and Young Pyromancer come pretty quickly back to back, and then, to your point, then it's off the rails, and you've got 14 land Gush decks.
Young Pyromancer came out in the core set, and then we had the Delve cards, and then we had Dak to fuel the Delve cards.
Yeah, it really went off the rails.
And that's probably really where 4 Gush, for Jitaxian Pro really started taking off, is that 4 Treasure Cruise, 4 Dig Through Time, which actually you weren't even playing that many, but it's just get as much shit into the graveyard as fast as possible.
Yeah, I think 4 Treasure Cruise was not even a question that needed to get whacked, right?
I more than once turn 1 Treasure Cruise.
Oh, I believe it. Yeah, I believe that.
So the issue with Magic, as we see a lot, is that much like price elasticity, once decks get used to misstepping the misstep, the misstep, the misstep, the misstep, the misstep, it's just sort of they stay. It's very hard to get those deck slots back. So the Delve spells and the token generators incentivize you to fill your graveyard as fast as possible. And those decks were running 16 free spells: 4 Probe, 4 Gush, 4 Force, and 4 Misstep. And when you've got token generators and Delve, you want max free spells.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And then it's just very hard to back cards out of vintage decks. They get it gets incestuous, you know what I mean? It takes somebody to really build a deck that's just going to not lose to misstep, which there were some of those during the Chalice era. You remember those blue-red decks that played Chalice and they played just Recall maybe?
Yeah, they played the Sphinx, where every time you draw a card,
Consecrated Sphinx.
Every time they draw a card, you draw 2.
Yeah, there was a mono
Blue Moon was what the deck was called.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There was Blue Moon. There was also a mono blue deck. I remember a guy I played it against up in Boston had kind of invented it, and it had no 1-drops in the entire deck except Ancestor Recall, and then he ran Chalice of the Void, and it used to wreck Shop's decks.
Yeah, and he just jumped the curve.
Yeah.
Jump the curve, right? I mean, you can play Impulse in that fucking deck. You're just trying to avoid the whole stew of misstep, the misstep, the misstep.
Put Arcane Denial in there.
So I will point out, on the subject of homogeneity, we talked about this a bit earlier. Are we still in VSL? Is VSL over right now? I actually don't know because I stopped watching it. We discussed earlier that I think Vegas will be super exciting because there will be no SCGs or anything putting out deck lists, there will be a lot of people showing up with decks that were good in their 30, 40 person meta. And I don't know if VSL is going on right now, but if it is, or if it isn't, then we have potential for that same kind of thing at Eternal Weekend and Eternal Extravaganza for people. You know, the biggest tournament that gets played is going to be the Vintage Monthly, which is usually like what?
Yeah, the Power 9 Challenge.
Yeah.
We just missed the Waterbury, so the Waterbury had it all legal, and now the Power 9 Challenge in May is probably all that's left, right?
We'll also get Almond Cats before then, right? We'll have Almond
Right.
Cats in this, and yeah, there should be no net decks for Vegas. I'm gonna fucking rape everybody. It's gonna be insane. You're not gonna see this shit coming.
You know, that's one thing that's funny is I know on So Many Insane Plays they've commented about this, is that like there's a lot more. I think there's a lot more Vintage going on around the world than people give Vintage credit for, but nobody publishes deck lists, so it's really hard to net deck, which is. That's the reason that we publish every single deck at our tournaments, is just like to get some more information out there, which I mean, it's a 9-man tournament. Half of us are drunk and like a lot of it is just brews, but there's just like, there's no information. If you look on TC Decks, it's like paper tournaments, it's us and like Eternal Weekend Europe, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we don't, I mean, we get 12 to 14 for Vintage F&M and we don't publish lists, you know, because I'm fucking lazy and I hate the internet.
Go look at how lazy I am. After top 4, it's just a scan of all of the deck lists.
Oh, we had joked about getting everyone to play a Harsh Mentor list, and then being the first people to publish lists with Harsh Mentor. But look, the entire top 4 all Harsh Mentor.
Which also means we are the only people to ever publish Harsh Mentor Vintage deck lists, where you could also play for Gush in the tournament
until Gush gets unrestricted in a couple of years.
Well, it's funny. There's Legacy this Thursday, and it's going to be the most bizarre dead format. It'll be restricted with no Almond Cat, like random format that will never exist.
Yeah, a 1 week format, really.
I'm going to play Miracles just to throw everybody for a loop.
In Vintage?
No. We have Legacy on Thursday, Vintage on Friday this week.
BNR list is effective today.
Yeah, exactly.
So
but then Almond Cats
play the top.
I know. I'm going to play Miracles. I didn't say I was going to play fucking top.
Oh. When you said you were going to play Miracles, I thought you meant it the way most people mean it.
Yeah.
No, I'm going to play like Portent and Latinam's Legacy and all these fucking terrible cards. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah.
So getting back to the structure we had planned, next question. What do the decks that are playing Gush and Jataxian Probe, what do they replace those slots with? We talked about paradoxical outcome decks that are probably only changing a handful of cards, but in general, what is this going to turn into?
Yeah, if the mentor decks, I still think Cavern. I think it's going to be who resolves his mentor and who mentors harder, right? So if you're not playing outcome, you're removing some Gushes, you're putting in you can either hedge the blue mirror or you're changing islands to caverns and you're playing tops. I still think you're probably playing tops. Maybe now you play Soul Ring, right? The faster you can slam your mentor, you're probably going to win the mentor mirror. And then the decks that lose probe, the combo decks that lose probe, like Belcher, the faster outcome decks. I don't know. I played a lot of like turn 0 outcome, like with all the opals, defense grids, 4 probes, really fast outcome, super combo with like windfall on the play type fucking outcome.
Right.
Well, Belcher's a particularly interesting case because Belcher can't slot in a non-free spell, right?
Right.
Yeah, Belcher has a problem too because most of the lists are still playing Chrome Mox in some number, and you start to dilute and Force of Will. So you dilute the blue count by getting rid of Probe. Things get dicey. I was not playing Force of Will in my paradoxical outcome deck because I just wanted to win as fast as possible. And but Probe was super good in that deck. Like, obviously the card makes Magic, I don't know, some order of magnitude easier. I mean, just knowing your opponent's opening hand, knowing whether your defense grid has text.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel playing. I've been playing Paradoxical Oath, which with Storm in it, obviously, is that so much of the time, I think I played one Thoughtseize, or actually it was one Duress, And so much of the time, Gitaxian Probe served essentially the same role for 0 mana of going, are you clear? Or how many spells do you have to bait out first?
Mhm.
And like to that end, I'm going to keep 1 probe in, obviously. And then I'm thinking it's like a duress and like a vault and a vault and a key. There, done. I'm done fixing my deck.
Yeah, I think it. Here's the issue. I mean, this is another reason I wanted to see Misstep go. Was I feel like Misstep and Probe. Sorry, Misstep and Probe was what I wanted to see restricted. Was because the efficacy now of spot discard is at like an all-time ebb. I mean, it's to spend sorcery speed mana main phase to basically make your opponent throw a mental misstep in his graveyard for 2 life was really, I don't want to say backbreaking, but the play pattern was kind of depressing.
Yeah.
And like then you just get into the wormhole of playing your own missteps, and that's the reason it got banned in Legacy, is because
every deck was 56 cards. Every deck in
Yes.
Legacy had 56 cards. That's why it was banned.
Yeah, and the play pattern was miserable. You just all fanned your openers out, and if you had X plus 1, where X is the number of missteps your opponent had, then you got to like resolve your Aether Vial. Yeah. I mean, it was like I remember being in Japan playing what was, I guess, and we called Death and Taxes back then, but it was like white Vial deck, and I had 4 missteps because you could not resolve the card Aether Vial unless you had your own missteps.
It was probably called Dead Guy Ale at the time.
Yeah,
even though that's a black-white deck, but yeah, and to the, like you said, the value of discard is so low. Like I said, I'm playing a Storm deck with 1 discard spell. That's so wrong.
Playing Tendrils
Yeah,
with 1 discard spell?
with 1 discard spell and 4 Gitaxian Probes that let me know whether or not I'm clear.
Fair enough.
I'm also playing Grizzlebrand, so I can draw 7 cards for 0 mana.
Wait, are you talking vintage here?
Yeah.
What deck were you playing? Oh,
I was playing
yeah, okay.
Paradoxical Oath.
Yeah, gotcha. The Oath one. Okay.
I mean, you're almost better off getting into a giant misstep fight on your turn anyway, and just tendriling them than you are.
Oh yeah, I
Yeah, with the misstep build the storm count.
I won a game this weekend that relied on my opponent force of willing a spell that he didn't need to because that added 1 to the storm count.
Yeah, we'll see how it shakes out. My take is that the strategy will probably still be dominant with respect to like Mentor, and then if they're going to be a little bit more trigger happy with their bans, I still don't want to see Mentor go. Like I'd like to see a 1 misstep world where you have to play a Mentor with no probe and no misstep to protect it, and see if you can actually keep the piece of shit alive. Because
I'd like Misstep to be restricted. I'd also, for completely unrelated reasons, like to see Mentor restricted and Gush unrestricted so that Young Pyromancer could be a thing.
Those are for personal reasons.
Those, I mean, like half personal, half how I think the format should be.
Yeah.
Well, they're not restricting, sorry, this is vintage. They are not restricting on power level, right? We all understand that. Otherwise, Shop and Bazaar would be long gone. So,
well, they are not restricting
Gush is
certain
obviously
things on power level. Like that was actually a comment on Eternal Weekend. Was Randy asked, what's this fuck? The guy who runs the mana drain said, "What do we restrict next to fix Workshop?" I can say, "Oh, you restrict Workshop and unrestrict all of the artifacts that you've restricted on Workshop." They're obviously not going to do that, so let's just move to the next thing in the conversation.
Yeah, and then so Gush,
Which, by the way, they
Gush
landed
would
on
be-
Ancient Tomb. Fucking Ancient Tomb.
Yeah, I do remember them actually threatening to restrict Ancient Tomb.
If they restrict Ancient Tomb, it's the biggest, most obvious dodge of the problem. You know, like, I mean, well, let's restrict the 2 mana land rather than the 3 mana land, just because the 3 mana land.
The 2 mana land with a probably more important drawback.
Yeah.
The whole argument is ridiculous anyway, because you just look at those historical results. You had bug decks that didn't run 4 mental missteps that had real cards like Spell Pierce. They were crushing 4 Chalice, 4 Golem mud. Like, you are not fucking favored. I got splattered by bug at Gen Con, like on 4 Chalice, 4 Lodestone Shops multiple times. Yep. I never felt favored in that matchup. I never felt like on the draw, if they went Death Right Go, that I had any prayer of ever winning the game. I mean, you know, and now you're down to 1 Chalice and 1 Golem. Those bug decks will kick the fucking raw dick out of a Shop deck.
That's just an advantage that a non-Workshop Null Rod deck has always had against Workshop is like you can land an early threat and then just cut them off of their ability to do anything. I mean,
Yeah,
the first time,
just ride it all the way.
the first time we ever did Vintage in Houston, like once we got it started back up again, I played Merfolk, and I had a game where game 2, I'm on the play against Workshops. I go Curse Catcher. He's like, "You kept in Curse Catcher? God, you're dumb." And he went like Trinisphere go, and I was like, "Strip mine you." And he didn't play another spell. And 21 turns later, I won the game.
That's painful.
Yeah, it's fucking true. I mean, I used to stomp shops, 4 Golem, 4 Chalice stomps with decks with anything with Wastelands and like Stoneforge Mystic. I would routinely beat those decks. I won our top 2 split the 90-man Gen Con in the middle of 4 Chalice, 4 Golem, shop hell.
That was with Dega Dude Sweats, right?
No, that was the year after. The top 2 split was for the Antiquity sheet at Gen Con. And that was just blue-white with, my sideboard plan against 4 Golem, 4 Chalice shops was actual 4 Stoneforge Mystics. And they couldn't beat that card.
I mean, yeah, that's the other boogeyman for shops is Oath of Druids. They just have a hell of a time with that.
It's if you resolve a threat, cutting off my mana doesn't, or if I resolve a threat, cutting off my mana doesn't help you anymore.
Go ahead, land a Trinisphere and Wasteland me out. I'm gonna have a Grizzlebrand soon, and I don't give a shit if I cast another spell the rest of the game.
So
I lost my winning in to Oath at Bazaar Mox, and we both mulled to 5, and I went Ancient Tomb Thorn, and he went Forbidden Orchard, Black Lotus, Oath of Druids.
Yep.
Welcome to hell.
Good luck. Yep.
So we've kind of danced around this a bit. With these 2 restrictions, what gets better in Vintage? What immediately gets better?
I think Oath of Druids. I mean, you're gonna have Shops is kind of the top deck right now, and you got rid of a deck that Oath is bad against and left the top deck as probably the only deck that's really favored against Shops. Oh, sorry, the Bug Fish deck is also pretty bad for Shops.
Bugfish has been, it seems like, on the downswing for the last several months, though. So I don't know how good that will be.
Yeah, the Weeable Bugbear deck. But
I think it's a fine deck, but it's you really have to draw your sideboard cards, or you're in a bad spot. I mean,
and you're probably playing.
On it earlier.
You're probably playing a lower amount of draw
the Clock of the Mentor. You have a few turns to find your token hate against Young Pyromancer. You do not have a few turns to find your token hate against Mentor.
Yep.
Oh yeah, when I played Bugfish, I played it a lot on Moto because it's, other than the Wastelands, it was extremely cheap. And I was playing straight up 3 or 4, switching back and forth Virulent Plagues. Man, let me tell you, it feels so good to be like, buy you Virulent Plague, like misstep. I'm like, cool, Jet Virulent Plague, go.
Yeah, I played 2 in my sideboard at Champs this year, and it doubles as at least a reasonable card against Dredge. So
how many people had to read your Virulent Plague?
I mean, everybody has to read. Okay, I have a funny story about Virulent Plague. So I also played. It was the EE4, I think. It was the last one they held in the cinder block box next to the crack house before they moved on to greener pastures. But anyway, long story short, I played Hydra Gush at that tournament, and I brought from Atlanta, flew up there, only like a 1 box of vintage cards to play this one deck. So I didn't audible, and B, I didn't get my thing stolen by a crackhead from next door. And I'm putting the deck together, writing out my list, and a buddy looks over and goes, "What's that card?" And I go, "Oh, that's Virulent Plague." And the guy across from me goes, "No, it's not. That's it's the card you play with False Cure, the enchantment. It's
God.
It looks the same. It's fuck my life.
Sanguine Blood or something. Is that am I in the right card?
It is literally some.
Sanguine Blood, by the way, literally translates to blood. So we're clear.
I think it was in Magic Origins. I didn't even have the fucking set right. Where is it?
Oh yeah. No, I know what you're talking. I know what card you're talking about.
I want to say it's an uncommon.
Yeah.
It's basically
all I heard was fucking
Tainted Remedy is what I brought.
Tainted Remedy. There we go.
Yes. So I had the gentleman's 2 Tainted Remedies ready to go in my vintage sideboard, so that when someone brought Kavu Predator aggro, I was fucking.
So wait, did you actually bring the wrong deck, or the wrong card, or did he just think you brought the wrong card?
No, I stone brought the wrong cards. I brought 2 Tainted Remedies thinking that was actually Virulent Plague. And if you actually look at Tainted Remedy now, you realize what a fucking retard I am, because nowhere on there does the -2/-2 actually appear.
I'm going to go ahead and read, because I'm sure no one here knows what that does. 2 and a black, enchantment, Origins rare. If an opponent would gain life, that player loses that much life instead. Drink this, brother. It will bring you rest.
That'll hate out Tendrils of Agony pretty decently, as long as you're ahead on life.
Yeah, the fucking irony is the card that's best with it, Reverend Silence, doesn't work with it because you fucking stone your own Tainted Remedy. So you have to have like all
right.
You have to have like a grip full of Sky Shroud cutters, and then you just fist fuck them with them.
You know what? I wasn't on Virulent Plague. There's another card that's similar to Virulent Plague that gives tokens -1/-1, and that's what I was playing.
Oh, Illness
Which
in
is
the ranks?
super
Illness in the
illness,
ranks.
yeah, illness in the danks, please.
Yeah.
I like Virulent Plague, I think, a little better in Vintage.
Yeah.
Because it kills your bridge from below tokens, too. But if you're looking for speed.
Yeah, and it doesn't get misstepped, honestly. That's like 99% of the fight that I'm trying to fight.
Well, yeah, but, I mean, Mentor was such a fast deck. I liked Virulent Plague because it's like you could just play 2 of them on turn 1 and it doesn't matter that they had misstep.
Yeah.
There's also Dread of Night. That was the other, you're probably talking Illness, Dread of Night, Virulent Plague, maybe even Engineered Plague as your 4 contenders for the...
Engineered Plague is sweet. I played 4 of those in the sideboard. Like, the day after I got my Underground Seas, I got my Engineered Plagues so that I could beat Merfolk, because Merfolk was still a tier 1 deck.
Blackfish is one of my favorite decks. Like, Merfolk splashing black for sweet sideboard cards, and like Dread of Night and all that stuff. And then I never play Force of Will and Merfolk. I just play the Ringleader, and that really gets everybody by surprise.
When I started playing Legacy, you could play any color with Merfolk. So everybody started by buying blue Merfolk. Then usually you bought Tropical Islands and Termagoyf, because Termagoyf is the best Merfolk.
You played Tarmogoyf and Merfolk. What the fuck?
And then you could go red and play Bolts and Merfolk. That was a real thing. You could go white and usually use like a split of a couple different cards. It was mostly for your sideboard.
Meddling Mage, I'm thinking.
It was like Meddling Mage. You could play some Plows if you wanted to. And then
No. You played Swordfish. That was the sickest version of Merfolk ever. It had Stoneforges.
But like you got to play Rule of Law on that deck, and then you could also splash black and play whatever the fuck the black Merfolk is. That's okay.
Oh, there's some fucking sick-ass off-color Merfolk. There's a pro-green one that stones your opponent's Tarmogoyfs. There's a pro-red one if you go blue-white. Your buddy's taking off his headphones. He's like, who is this fucking casual
stretching
that knows every fucking shit-stained Merfolk ever printed? Is he drunk on Quaaludes?
So I'll tell you my favorite Magic story ever that I think really expresses what a lot of the guys our age playing Eternal is about is at GPDC bombed out Costco. That Legacy GP was the first Legacy GP I ever went to. I got introduced to, I think he was one of your crew, but Jaco introduced me to him. And he was a guy playing the black Merfolk that when it does a damage, he draws a card, right?
Zig!
So the guy had this thing where he played this in every he played it in every big tournament. And his thing was between rounds, however many cards he drew. And he only played one of the thing. However many cards he drew, he would do that many shots between rounds. And I met the guy like 15 minutes after he finished round 2, and he went 2-0 drop. Because it was like game 1 of round 2. He went like second turn, played the motherfucker, and hit this guy for like 6 turns in a row.
That'll do it.
Yeah, dude, that's fucking Sig. He's a boss. It's all that has to happen is they have to lose 3 life. There's also the other one is Cold-Eyed Selkie. That is the real motherfucker. That you draw cards for every damage it does.
Oh god.
Yeah, so you play Cold-Eyed Selkie, Lord, and then you just Ancestral Recall every turn.
I'll also say along those lines, that was the day that I met Jaco, and we started talking. And Jaco had been hosting our podcast for 6 months by then. And he just like cuts me off mid-sentence and goes, I have to go to Jaeger Bombs now. And I was just like, okay. It's like 10 a.m. and round 1 just finished, but all right.
I don't even remember what that was. The bombed out Costco. Was that? Oh man, it was before cons, maybe.
I was
before cons. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Fuck if I know. Oh yeah, it was definitely before cons because cons came out right before GP Jersey.
Right. And people were playing like High Tide. I mean,
oh yeah, it was. And
where
GP Jersey was where like the Delve spells had just all come out, and vendors were selling like the deck was Blue Red Delver, and vendors were selling the card that's like white pro red. Whenever someone casts a red spell, you gain a life.
Core Firewalker.
Core Firewalker.
Core Firewalker. I bought the last 2 Core Firewalkers in the room at $8 a card.
Also,
then,
a fine Louis Gossett Jr. movie.
And then the other thing that was funny was because that deck, it was Delvers, Young Pyromancers, Treasure Cruise. It was all cheap spells except for Forces and Volcanics. Volcanics were like $400 on site.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when they were like $150 on eBay. But they were like $400 on site because it was the one card everyone showed up needing.
What a deal. I was going to go to that GP, had rooms booked. Me and Brian Plattenberg, you probably met Brian. We were plays Miracles a lot now, probably won't. We were scheduled to go up to that, and then at that point the Delve spells were so fucking out of hand, and that Omni Dig deck was like unbeatable, and I just told him I'm not going.
The one that had really taken off at that point, because as I recall, it was the big deck was the Blue Red Delver with like 4 Treasure Cruise and 2 or 3 dig through time, where it was just they never had fewer than 4 cards in hand.
Treasure Cruise only stayed off the banned list for like 2 months, and then
it stayed off for exactly 1 rotation. It was printed, and the next ban restricted list it was banned.
Yeah, the Fate Reforge banned restricted announcement whacked it right
Which
away.
also shows you how stupid Magic players are. Dig through time is way better than Treasure Cruise.
Dude, not everybody's stupid. The first Eternal weekend that it was legal, my teammate was Paul Callis. He comes to Gen Con a lot. But anyway, he wrote on his Dig Through Times, "This will be restricted," and played them the first time they were legal. Or I think he wrote "soon to be restricted" on them because he thought that was the first thing that was going to get the axe before Treasure Cruise.
Yeah, it was very clearly way better. So two quick questions. First, are you going to Gen Con this year? It's Gen Con 50.
Does a bear shit in the woods? I mean, give me a fucking break. Of course, I go to Gen. I've been going to Gen Con since you literally did not know how to use a toilet.
I believe that. The second thing I was going to tell you about GP Jersey, talking about GP bombed out Costco, which is, by the way, I looked it up. It was a Walmart, not a Costco. No, it was a Sam's Club, not a Costco. GP Jersey was the weekend where I spent like $400 on cabs in one weekend and then emailed Pete Hoffling and was like, fuck this venue. The official hotel is 2.5 miles away, and it is a $60 cab ride away from Newark. It's even more than that from like fucking LaGuardia or Kennedy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this was a long time ago because it was pre-Uber. And like, as the crow flies, the Hampton Inn was like 0.6 miles, but it turned out that you needed to actually cross a 14-lane highway for it to be 0.6 miles. In fact, you had to walk 2 miles down and over an overpass, past a man living in a box to the other side, and then
they also on the GP site it said that they had a shuttle, and there were like 70 people in the room the room at the bottom of the hotel. And I'm like, guys, I'm calling a cab right now. And some guy just walks up to a random guy and says, hey, what are y'all all gathering up for? And they're, oh, we're waiting for the shuttle. I go, oh, there isn't a shuttle. And it wasn't like there is not a shuttle that goes to the convention center. It was, we don't have a shuttle. We do not own a vehicle to take you where you need to go.
Yeah, fuck that. And that wasn't Star City. You spammed Pete Hoffling. That was TJ Collectibles.
No. GP Jersey was definitely Star City.
Oh, Jersey was. Sorry. GP bombed out Sam Club was TJ Collectibles.
Yeah. DC was TJ, and that was the one where the official hotel was like across. It was actually across, as I recall, 2 highways.
Yeah.
But there was a Holiday Inn that shared a parking lot with it. And this is now a thing going on a completely separate rant that I'm really annoyed about is that I get that these TOs get deals with hotels and they're like, we'll get you a group rate. But if there's a closer hotel, publish that fact. I went to GP DC when it was in fucking DC, and the official hotel was a mile away, and Star City wasn't even staying there. They were staying at the hotel across the street, and I was really drunk and had been... The one that was in downtown DC.
Yeah, I went to that one as well. There was I think an Embassy Suites.
There were there were 2 or 3 hotels within 4 blocks.
Yeah.
The official hotel was like $600 a night and was a mile away. And that's where I stayed because a bunch of people started texting me like, Sam, you've got a bunch of money in the bank. You should book a room for all of us. I was like, okay. And I just booked the official room.
Did you get a room for Gen Con, or did you get horse fucked?
I got horse fucked, but I also just got a new job, so I'm still not 1,000% on whether or not Gen Con will happen. I also have multiple friends who have rooms, so I'm confident I at least have a floor.
Yeah. Yeah, this year was a fucking, I mean, every year's for the past 5 has been a shit show.
I was
this year
86 minutes in, and the closest hotel was at the airport. And I have always told people that if you cannot stay downtown, it's not worth going.
Yeah, I agree. It is absolutely not worth going. I got the Miracle ticket and got the Hyatt for myself and Jack and maybe one other person, but it was just
well if your floor is available, I'm going to be shopping for that soon. So
no, I think my floor will probably be Sean French and then perhaps my other teammate Pants. And I cannot. I would prefer just beds, no floors, and a nice clean bathroom for my dual income, no children lifestyle.
Understand.
But for Eternal Weekend, I went and booked right away once it got announced in Pittsburgh because there is a fucking Steelers game. So if they hem and haw on the hotel,
it's also Pitt Homecoming. It's also Pitt Homecoming.
Okay, sure, throw that on there.
Did that?
Yeah, so it's a fucking Steelers game, Pitt Homecoming. Those hotel rooms will, at least the main ones that aren't the presidential suites, will be gone by June or July. So the second Nick announced it, I went and booked at the Hampton Inn right across the street.
I will probably do the same thing I did last year, which is go, I don't have the money to book a room, but I am fucking good for it. Someone else go get it, please.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, most hotel sites are let you book, and there's always a cancellation policy. So you're rarely out of pocket unless you want to pay like look, you get $10 off a night to prepay for the whole thing. Vegas is the exception. Like most Vegas hotels want a chunk down, but
on that note, by the way, for future reference, that's how you should do Gen Con. I have a friend who he has alerts on every hotel website, and he books a room at Gen Con, and he books the refundable rate specifically so that if he doesn't get a room, he still has a room.
Right. Yeah. There was one year when I was not this year. I think it was 2 years ago. I won a free Gen Con. I won a free hotel, free airfare, free everything to Gen Con, free pass for 4 days. And
the pass is the cheap part of that. Don't give a fuck about that.
Me and my buddy Brian were convinced this fucker was not going to pay for our hotel. He procrastinated. Well, I missed housing, assuming this fucking ass clown was going to pay for our hotel. And so I ended up booking at like the fucking Velveteen Rabbit or some boutique hotel in Indianapolis, and it was like $600 a night. And it was refundable. And then if this guy didn't come through, I was going to print the invoice, drive to Tennessee, and staple it to his fucking face. And luckily,
I'll tell you sometime when we're not broadcasting live that's less than I paid.
Damn, son, rolling high, rolling in the deep. That's a Beta Savannah a night.
On that subject, I know, Ben, you're from further up north, not there, and Sean, you're well-traveled. How is Pitt in terms of places to hang out, play Magic, drink beer, and not have to Uber all the fuck over the world?
I've actually never been to Pittsburgh, so I don't really know.
I've been a couple of times for work around that same area, and it's your standard, like, late 90s, early 2000s revitalization effort. Probably plenty of places to eat, none of which compare to Philly. I haven't been probably since 2006-ish, 5-ish, maybe.
That's a long time, but
yeah.
How would you compare to, say, Columbus, where we were last year, which I very much enjoyed?
I think Columbus is fine in terms of like having a lot of nice places to eat all within walking distance. So that's fine. I think my biggest problem with Columbus last year was that they had taken the Arnold statue down for construction purposes. So half the reason I went was to get pictures in front of the Arnold statue, and they had put it into storage while they did the reconstruction on the convention center. So I also think they have a fake market. Like saying they have a market and in reference to like the Reading market is fucking horseshit. I mean, that is not a Reading. That is not even remotely like the Reading market. They don't even have breakfast in that market.
I walked by it and didn't know. Like, I walked by it and didn't know that I had walked by it.
You're talking that little market area in Columbus that was kind of a couple blocks down from the...
Yeah. There were some people who said things like, "Oh, there's no Reading market, but Columbus has its own market." That was absolute fucking bullshit.
I think there's no market, but 3/4 of a mile away is the Ohio State University, and there's lots of college bars.
Oh, there's a million bars and a million restaurants. It's cheap to drink there. I I mean, I drank a lot on one night in particular.
Oh yeah,
whatever the
I
night
know.
was.
I know. At like 2 o'clock, I went home, and it was purely because I was like, I don't know if I'm not invited. And they're like, dude, Sean's really drunk. You're invited. He's just not telling anyone that anyone's invited. I was like, I think, well, like the tournament starts in like 6 hours, so I'm gonna go home.
Yeah, that was a rough night. Greg Mitchell did get up and managed to whatever. Like
I was
top
told
30
you consumed an entire bottle of Grey Goose.
Oh yeah, that was easily consumed. Plus, a dozen beers. But to be fair, we drank a lot of water. We had a great waitress. She kept our water full. So
Yep.
Always hydrate, kids.
Well, we're real far off the track that we got on, but I know at least Sean and I had a good time. And then Ben is silent. It's just like, no, I had a bad time.
I didn't go to a few of those GPs, so I wasn't.
Oh, I meant tonight while we're talking.
When do you get into Vegas?
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. No, sorry. All right.
Like our audience gives a fuck, but when do you get into Vegas?
I'm out on Vegas.
I'm getting in on Wednesday morning. I'm going to spend basically all day Wednesday getting cards signed and go from there. But then I'm taking off on a Saturday morning. My brother lives up in Reno now, so I'm going to fly up there on Saturday and bail on the weekend. Because
I think that's actually
what I'm going to do, play Modern. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, in retrospect, I wish I had left on Saturday. I was like, oh, I'll have nothing to do there, and Saturday's usually kind of a dead day at the airport. You can get in.
Yeah.
And then you just lit a bunch of money on fire at the craps table, right? Because that's what I would do if I went to Vegas, which is part of the reason I don't want to go to Vegas, because I will light a pile of money on fire.
Yeah. Well, I'm still around for Friday night, and I'll probably scrub out a Legacy and have nothing to do on Friday anyway, so that's probably what I'll be doing then.
I'm just going to play Vintage nonstop. I have a sneaky suspicion this might be like one of our last big Legacy GPs, so I am going to make an effort to play in it.
I disagree. I think we will have a big Legacy GP every year, and it will be Vegas, and there will not be another GP.
Well,
yeah, I would be surprised by that.
So
I think there will be no standalone Legacy.
Yeah, agreed. I think you'll go GP Vegas Eternal Weekend.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I know y'all might be shocked by this. I've never been to Vegas, but as soon as they do that, that's when I'm going to Vegas for the first time. Well, that or DEF CON.
Well, I mean, don't they say usually the Legacy GPs get better attendance than the standard and modern ones, just because the Legacy players all fly in?
Well, Legacy players all fly in, and there's only one a year. But the stat,
they had the same number of Legacy.
The stat that they've always been bigger. There's been this conspiracy theory that since Jersey, all the Legacy GPs have been capped, and several of them have capped, and it's like, well, it isn't the biggest event of the year, but it also hit the cap, so it couldn't be the biggest event of the year.
Right.
And they also, at Jersey, now again getting into conspiracy theories, was when they changed the way that they counted players. They now count GP attendance based on round 1 attendance, not round 0 attendance, because the value was so high at Jersey that over 100 people dropped before round 1.
Yeah.
And it would have been the most attended GP of all time had that not happened at the time.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
All right, I'm gonna go see if my map hack downloaded on my Xbox. But it was good talking to you again.
All right,
I'll catch you later.
Is that about it for us as well, Ben? Do we have any closing thoughts on Gush, Gitaxian Probe, etc.?
I think we pretty much covered it.
What are you going to be playing at the next vintage?
It's top secret, man.
Top secret.
I actually have no idea. I mean, I planned on playing Mindslaver until Saturday night, and then just put together Oath instead because I was out of printer paper. So,
what are you playing?
Who knows?
GPT and Legacy.
Oh, I'll be playing Sneak and Show.
What are you playing Thursday? Oh, I guess you're going to be practicing for the GPT.
Yeah, and
I'll be texting everyone to borrow Tinfin's cards.
Yeah, I'm in Oklahoma until Friday afternoon. So next time you'll see me
fucking awful.
Yeah, I'm not that excited about it.
All right, hold on. We have to sit here for like 10 seconds because the recording cuts off weird.
Interesting.
And just look at each other.
Hey there.